Shalom, shalom, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to part 2 of the migration of the 10 tribes of Israel. And this one is part 2, the linguistic evidence of the 10 tribes. Would that be a safe assumption to say there? The linguistic evidence of the 10 tribes?
Right. See, many years ago, I came to see that key names stick with people down through the centuries and millennia. I mean, like the Table of Nations in Genesis 10, the 70 families there. When you focus in on them, analyze them, you'll find a lot of those names on people and places in the earth today. Same way Hebraic and Israelite names, key words, terms, so forth, carried down into places, rivers, and so forth.
All right, well, let's go ahead and start on this part and go ahead and show us where the 10 tribes are going to end up at.
Okay. I wrote Mot Big Humor, or something like that. When the Assyrians took the house of Israel into captivity, they didn't call them the house of Israel. I guess you could say even by then that they were starting to lose their identity. Okay? And I think there's a mosquito trying to get you back there.
Probably.
Well, what they called them was the land of Israel. Mot is land, like Eretz in Hebrew. Mot be Cumin. What's Cumin? Well, the most prominent of the latter kings of Israel was Omri. See, they called him the house of Omri, after that prominent king there toward the east. See, the house of Israel in Hebrew would be Beit Yisrael. Okay, house of Assyrian was Beit. Be human, house of honor. And I'm going to show you how that name comes down in various forms, even to nations and places today. Now, you have this feature with certain names where sometimes they'll transliterate it with a K, sometimes with a G. It has to do with the letter I in Hebrew. It's something I understand that hardly anybody knows how to pronounce it today like it was back then. Okay, Caleb's more up on this feature than I am, so I'll let him come up second and explain it.
Well, the best I can understand it, based on what we know about the pronunciation of Arabic, which is a sister language of Hebrew, and the few people that still speak Aramaic. So, the letter Ayin is what they call a guttural letter, which means you kind of say it back in the throat. And from what I see, the letter Ayin was sort of pronounced like Ayin. Like Ayin is kind of hard to say. I think that's pretty much how they pronounce it in Arabic these days. And like in Arabic, there's also an alternate form of it called the Gain, which is like a hard G sound. And I think, and there's certain, you can even see that in certain names in the Bible, like Gaza or Gomorrah. You look at those in the Hebrew, and that starts with an Ayin. So they might have been one time this letter here. So that might at one time even have had that pronunciation in Hebrew as well, the Gain sound. So that's probably why you get all these different variants, like this code.
Now, we got Qumri right here. Now, would that be something similar to Qumran?
No, I don't think so. I'll show you the form in just a minute. Let me get my chart up here.
Thank you, Caleb. Appreciate that.
I've made a list of what I perceive as some of the key Israelite names here. And then I have this map that I was using a little bit a while ago that a lot of these are owned there one place or another. Well, look at this first. Just try to keep this in mind, and I think when we look at the map, more of them come into place. Now, again, first key name is that one we just looked at, the Omri, start with the Ein, so generally comes out in Assyrian as Beit Humri, meaning house of Omri. All right, from that, you get names like Gimri, Cimmerians. Now, the Celtic type C, even before the soft vowel is always pronounced like a K, like the classic Roman sequence. So that's Khmer there.
So it's not Cimmerian.
It's not like a X. See, it's really Celt, not Celt. All right. Then you have Omri, Gamarai, and see there, like I was saying, you're getting a G in there instead of a K sound because of that time. Cimbri. Now, Wales, where my family came from in the mid-1600s. In English, we call it Wales. That's that hump on the west side of the main British Isle, bordering England. See, we hold up behind those mountains to keep them getting killed out with the Anglo-Saxons. Okay? In Welsh, they don't call it Wales, they call it Cymru, which is Omri. Okay? Next one is Gala, which I've already mentioned, showed you a while ago. That was the led away captive, carried captive, exile. Used several different places, usually with the house of Israel, but also with the house of Judah later on. Or shortly before the house of Israel was taken into Syrian captivity, an Assyrian king carried away some of the Jews, and they were led away captive. I think they wound up in what we know as Denmark. We'll look at that on the map in a little while. So anyway, the Gala, the exile, captivity route, that shows up in names you find in the Bible, like Galilee, Gilead. Notice they got the pink underline of where the root occurs. Golan, you know the Golan Heights, where the Jordanians had the guns until the Six-Day War in 67. See, in that case, that was outside the border of Israel, see, so it's sort of a foreign connotation out of the land. Now, Galatia, see, it has the Gala root there, Galatia. We pronounce that Galatia, don't we? That was a reversed migration of Celts. They went out of the land, area of captivity into Gaul, modern France. And then for some reason, they sailed back to northern Turkey and formed a colony, Galatia. And that's who Paul was writing his letter to.
So when he's writing this letter to the Galatians, they weren't actually Jews, but the house of Israel that he's talking to.
Right.
They're trying to show them, hey, we're bringing you coming back into the fold as is promised in Ezekiel.
Yeah, they were a Celtic element that had reverse migrated and settled in Turkey. All right. And I've already mentioned ancient France, which was a Celtic nation. It's named Gaul. That's the English form. The Latin form was Gallia, very close to the Hebrew. All right. Galicia, that's a province in Spain. We're going to talk a lot about Spain, the Iberian Peninsula. A key city on the northwest coast of Ireland is Galway. There against Spain on that Iberian Peninsula, you got the country of Portugal, port of the Gauls. What it means. All right. The Scots and the Irish are Gaelic, right? We pronounce that Gael, but they I've seen heard Lewis, old man there, speaking in Gaelic, they call it Gaul. just like the ancient French for Gallic, what we call Gaelic, they call Gallic, and that's Gaul, because, well, just like the end of that. It seems that this Celtic migration that came up in the 600s BC, that they tended to describe themselves using this name more so than anything else when they went up into Europe. And what does this word mean in the Gaelic language? It means exactly the same thing as God does in Hebrew. See, it's a sojourner that's traveled from one place to another, an exile, you see, trying to find a permanent place to life.
Well, because I can almost see the Hebrew here with El. I mean, it was something that was caused, that was allowed by Elohim.
Could be. Okay. Now, the third word here is the Isaac name, which Israelis, I think, pronounce Yitzchak.
No, Yitzchak.
Right? I'd say he's expert on these things. Now, in Genesis 21, verse 12, it says, "In Isaac shall your seed be called." See, the whole thing about the Quran is it's based on a lie. They say that it was Ishmael, that he was about to sacrifice on Mount Moriah instead of Isaac. But and then in the New Testament it will quote that, repeat, "In Isaac shall your seed be called." See, that's the real line. And in Amos 7:16, it uses the term house of Isaac is synonymous with house of Israel. Okay. Here's the Hebrew form. Now, from this Yitzchak, or however you pronounce it, you'll get things like Sakai. And this is different spelling than Sakai, and sometimes this is combined with Sunni. Sakai Sunni, which means sons of Isaac. From Sakai Sunni, you get Saxons. All right, now it's a little stretch of imagination, but the source I got says Scythian also comes from that. Now that's a key word over that area of captivity. We'll see it in a minute on the map. This is close to the Greek form of this. In Greek, skuthes. Paul used that in Colossians 3:11. All right, the Romans, when they transliterated this into Latin, see, you don't have a TH sound in Latin. They transliterated it as Scotti. Once you get to Scott, see, they're on the top of Britain, where some of these Scythians migrated and settled. They called Scotia. It's adding high A, Scot, and that's the Latin name for Scott. Okay. And by the way, we said that Wales in Welsh is kindred. It's your neighbor Omri. The Wales really is a Gaul word coming through the Germanic source. It's like Walla, or I think it used to have a G in front of it, Koala. You can see that clearly in modern French or Spanish. Wales in French is le pays des Gauls. You can see it right there. The country of the Gauls. Same in Spanish. El país de Gales. So, in both, going to make this, in both the names on the ancestral homeland there, it's hearkening to the house of Israel. Now, we got down to right here. Now, the tribe of Israel, Dan, and again, I've heard Jews pronounce that Dan.
It's Don.
Okay. It's the Dalet Nun root. See, Dalet is a doorway, door. Nun is light. When you go before the judge and if you respond properly, then the doorway of life is open to you.
And of course, this is where the 12 judges came from, was out of
The judges came, he shall judge his people, it said in Genesis 49. Right? That means judge. And notice that done in Irish Gaelic also means judge, just like Hebrew. And you're going to see loads of this name because I don't have a place right here handy. Or yes, I do. Where's that little piece of paper? Yeah, in Judges 18, verse 29, or before that in Joshua 19:47. Joshua 19, verse 47, it talks about the Danites capturing that northern city in Israel. Lachish, or something of that order. Leshem, one place. When they captured the city, they named it Dan after the name of their father Dan. Then in Judges 18:29, it says the same thing. See, it's hinting at the pattern that somehow these Danites, everywhere they went, they had a way of leaving their name behind. It's just all over the map, as we're going to see. Even though few, if any of them stayed somewhere, they'd leave the name on it. And in those names, you have elements like Dan, Den, Dean, like Aberdeen, Scotland. Den, Don, Gun, like Dunkirk over on the coast of France, which is Gaelic for Church of Dan. And then rivers over there above the Black Sea that start with the D-N, Dalet Nun River.
Now, this word right here, also in Spanish for Sephardic, is a title of someone of importance that will be like.
I don't know whether there's a connection. It could be because of that. Yeah. There's loads of Hebraic influence in Spain, as we'll see. Also, part of the Danites were sailors. Like in Judges 5:17, and it asks the question, and why did Dan remain in ships? They were the sailors of the Israelites. Now, the last one here is Heber, or Heber. Ein, Bet, Resh. You know, Hebrew in Hebrew is called Ivrit. See, that's the father of the Hebrews. That's one of those 70 patriarchs in Genesis 10, the second nation. Abraham was a descendant of him. And as Brad Scott so aptly explains, Hebrew means like somebody who crosses over to the other side of the river to find better land. Crosses some body of water. We'll see that the Hebrews have had the pattern of constantly moving basically westward. even across the Atlantic Ocean over here to Australia, places like that. All right, from the Eber root, you get things like Iberia. That's just the big peninsula that Spain and Portugal have done. Ancient Ireland used to be called the form of the same word, Iberia, something of that nature. And sometimes it was spelled Hibernia in English form. Again, here I'm highlighting the Hebrew roots in these words. Iberon is one. That's sometimes a little hard to see the transition, but you go to, I'm not sure exactly, Yerni, something of that sort, to Erin, Ire, which goes to Ireland. Okay. In Spain, you have the Rio Ebro and the Guadalquivir. Now let's look at the map and we'll see those. These two here. These are rivers. Okay. Here's the Ebro, Rio Ebro, and here's this river is the Guadalquivir. I think you can easily see that means Hebrew river in Spanish, Rio Ebro. But this is Arabic. Guadalquivir comes from something like Wadi al-Heber. Both of these key rivers in Spain mean Hebrew river. The whole peninsula is Iberia, like Hebrew land. Here's a province called Galicia with a Gala root. Exile, very well kept. And here's the port of the Gauls, this country here. You have a city here named Saragossa.
No. Zaragoza. Well, that will be after the
Zara
line
of
of
Judah.
Judah.
Gosa means fortress. Fortress of Zara. Okay. That is interesting to me because you see so many, the Jews who lived in Spain were the Sephardi.
This way we'll say it used to be called Sephardia later on from here.
I haven't seen that, but I wouldn't argue with it. Yeah.
Sepharad.
Yeah, a lot.
Sepharad.
Yeah, in the Bible it's Sepharad. That's what's used in modern Israeli Hebrew. It means Spain. And what is it? Zarephath.
France is Zarephath, yeah.
Zarephath is France in Hebrew. Okay. In the time of Solomon, there was a migration of these Sephardic Jews to Spain. Okay. Let's say this, the Zara line, that's my line, except mine came from ancient Greece through Rome before we got into Britain. See, that is the line of Dara or Darda. See the Dardanelle? Well, that looks like a Dan name there, but really it's the Darda. A variation of Dara, which is the youngest son of Zerah. Early on there, probably on some of the Danite ships, Dara went into Greece, married into the royal line there, and found himself ruling the place, and founded the House of Troy. from which all of the royal houses and families in this area here come. They're all descended from the house of Troy. You know, you probably know they're all cousins.
Well, even today,
Elizabeth.
they can use the royal lines all over, or find out to be cousins, or down.
Right. Like Elizabeth II and Juan Carlos of Spain. They're both great-grandchildren of Victoria.
And I think, and also the Denmark, or the Danish queens.
Yeah, you have kings and queens in Denmark, Sweden, I don't know about Norway, Holland.
Yeah.
And Prince Philip, Queen's husband, was of the Greek house. Now these Sephardic Jews, well, the reason you have Arabic formed here, you may be aware that for over 700 years, the Moors, Islamic, out of North Africa, tried their best to take over Spain and Portugal. And, well, for instance, I learned that 5% of the vocabulary in Spanish is Arabic. There's much influence there from that ancient, medieval Islamic empire.
We see that too, because you got Guadalajara here, and we know that Spain conquered some of the islands in the Pacific, and named one of them Guadalcanal, which is where there was a big famous battle during World War II.
Must have to do with the river some way. See, Wadi is a river, a dry riverbed. Right? But they finally lost out. The Moors, Islamics, early in 1492. So they immediately set about dealing with the other problem, as they perceived it, the Jews. The way they did, they issued a proclamation that by the end of July, all Jews either had to convert or be out of there. So you had this strange Sephardic Jew there in operation. His family had lived in Genoa, Italy for a while. In Spanish, his name was Cristobal Colon. We know him as Christopher Columbus. He was doing some fine operations there, getting finance for the Queen herself even. Tried to sail over here and find land. All right. On the 9th of Av that year, 1492, is when he sailed. At the same time as somewhere between 150 and 300,000 Jews fleeing across the borders, getting out of Spain and Portugal. But what Columbus was basically about was transferring as many as he could of his own people over here to the New World. So,
and that actual date was the date of the Spanish Inquisition, when it started. Am I correct? That was the reason he was
I would say so, because they had to be out of there that summer. Anyway, the point I'm making here is that not only do we have lost Israelites, lost identity at least, I would say that we've got multiple millions of lost Jews in the Western Hemisphere that are known as Hispanics. That's a different subject. Getting back to the Israelite names, all right, this is the area of captivity in here. All right, here's that key name Scythia we looked at, Scythus in Greek, which comes down as Scotty. You see here, Scotland. All right. A lot of this area up in here, one time or another, was called Samaria. Looks almost like Samaria, doesn't it? The former capital of the House of Israel. Okay. I notice you had an Iberia here. Then this peninsula is Iberia, and anciently so was Ireland. What else we got? Okay, Cymru, that's that honorary name, right? Here's another, Temeria. And here Wales, even today, it's called Cymru. See any more there?
Cimbri.
Huh?
Cimbri. Right there above Italy.
Right, the Cimbri here. Yeah, that's one of them. Now, let's look at the Dan names. Okay, here in ancient Greece, you had the Danae or the Danoi. I mean, it's been Dana. According to a historian I know, that evidently in ancient Greece they became very great in architecture and stuff, probably branching out from shipbuilding. Now, about the year 1200, 85 years after Deborah and Barak pulled off that great victory, it just wasn't a little thing, it changed the whole complexion. About 85 years later, some of the house of Troy, the Zerah line, they're called the Milesians. They came probably on day-night ships out to Gibraltar and up to Ireland. And they established a throne there in Ireland, the throne of the Zerah line. See, the Peretz line was the line that went through David down to Yeshua. Right. See. What it was, like I explained in my teaching 5 years ago here in Chicago, both twins had royal destiny. See, Peretz was over the house of Judah, coming down producing Messiah. But Darda, his line produced governmental structure for all these tribes when they migrated into place. Now, these Milesians, they're very well-known soldiers, very fierce soldiers apparently at that time. The Miles on the beginning of the name, that became the Latin word for soldier, Miles. And in Wales, I know you have a family named Miles that comes from that. They established a capital here that in English is called Tara Hill. Well, that's really Torah Hill, the Mount of Torah, as it were, law.
Because I see the same because my last name is McCoyle, and it comes from Ireland. It actually means dark stranger.
Dark stranger.
Dark stranger. So that was one thing. Then you told me, of course, about Finn McCoyle, who was actually my great kinfolk.
Ben McCoyle went to school with the prophet Jeremiah. That's a different teaching, though we don't have time to get into that today. That's part of that understanding of the throne.
So that was part of the house of Troy also.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And eventually the two lines were joined there and come on down today. Where's the queen? Now, let's see. Any more of that? Let's look at the Danite names, the Dan names now. Right. The main thoroughfare that they followed, the ones who were land-based, earlier on the seagoing people sailed. These that were taken into captivity, their main thoroughfare up into Europe was the Danube River. All right, flowing into the Black Sea. You also have these other rivers flowing into it, the Dniester, the Dnieper, and the Don. And flowing into the Don up here is the Donets. So you got 5 rivers there with the Dan name on it. Well, you come up into Europe, you got the Mark of Dan here, which we pronounce Denmark. They spell it even today Denmark. And that used to be called Jutland, which is Germanic there, short for Judaland. From what I learned, that little group of 2,000 Jews that the earlier king of Syria took captive and resettled up there. See, when these people came in here, This is just wide open territory. There's nobody there except a few nomads wandering around. You're just waiting for these people to occupy. And it was the western end of the Assyrian Empire, but hardly anybody lived there. Now,
Hey, Dad.
So then you got what's also become the Denmark we're talking about. You got this.
okay, what we call Sweden here, Sweden. And it's called Scandinavia. You got both, according to what I read. The Scan is the Scythian, Scythes root, and you got the Dan root in the middle of it.
So, Dad, could this be like a fulfillment of the prophecy that descendants of or Japheth would dwell in the tents of Shem? You said that these places weren't hardly civilized at that time, right? And then they come in and establish colonies, and of course these nomads would end up in these colonies, wouldn't they? You say that?
Yeah.
But they were largely Japhetic, right?
I would think so. I know the Eskimos and the Laplanders up in here are.
I mean, we know the Greeks are.
Yeah. The Greeks were Japhetic. And also got another river up here, up in the Baltic Sea, the Danwina River. So there's how many rivers? 6 with the Dan name on them. Got on the map here. Maybe others are smaller. All right. You got Sweden. What else we got? All right. The Irish annals, the history in Ireland recorded that the place was settled by the Tuatha de Danann, ancient Gaelic for tribe of Dan.
Now, because you got Tar Heel more now. Tar Heel is just southeast of modern day Dublin.
Yeah.
And this is where
See it.
Princess Tia
It was
Texas.
inland from a certain ancient seaport out here, still used today. That's where the ships would come like from Israel through the strait here and up and go into that port. London, that may also be a Dan name, but D-O-N on the end of London. In Latin it was Londinius, had D-I-N in the middle. See more Dan's missed? Okay, let's look at what's next? The Heber root. Again, the area here. Okay, and up here, these islands off the northwest coast of Scotland are called the Hebrides. H-E-B-R-C. As I say, there were 3 migrations over a long period of time. The Celts, the main group, came up in the 600s BC. Then I forgot exactly when the next group was, but the third one was after the Parthian Empire fell in 226 AD. 226 years into our time, AD era. Now, what was Parthia? Parthia was a great empire at one time in this territory over here. At its greatest expanse, it was 1,900 miles wide and 1,000 miles deep. And for a short period there, 40 to 37 BC, it even took in Palestine, Jerusalem. See, those are those Israelite peoples that were still there. And Joseph referred to them, Josephus, I should say, the great Jewish historian there during the latter New Testament period. He was Flavius Josephus, we call him. And he wrote that the 10 tribes are beyond the Euphrates till now, and are an immense multitude.
Not to be numbered.
Yeah, see, they receded eastward somewhat, but there was still a great mass of them there. But when the Parthian Empire fell in 226, then loads of them started hauling it out of there and migrating. And names like the Goth names. Here's Goth, here's Ostrogoth. See, the Roman Empire was overrun by those three people, the Vandals, the Heruli, and the Ostrogoths. Among those that came out in that migration were the Angles and the Saxons, who, here in the area of Denmark, North Germany, they're there a while, but in the year 449, they started pouring into Britain and taking over what eventually became England. There's also a third minority group with them called the Jews. Now, let's look at a name or two here. We know that the English were originally the Angles and the Saxons, so we talk about the Anglo-Saxon nation, race, and so forth. All right. We already determined that Saxons from Sakai Suni mean sons of Isaac. Okay. Who are the Anglos? You go back to those prophecies about Joseph, like in Deuteronomy, or like in Genesis 49, Jacob on his deathbed, other places. The symbol of the tribe of Joseph is the ox. Only they use 3 different words for ox. You have like the wild ox. You know, it said there that he shall drive his people into the uttermost parts of the earth. You know, like a big old longhorn steer pushing people forward. Okay. One of those names is Ein Gimel Wait, said. I knew Gimel.
No,
okay.
No, with no noon.
No?
Ein Gimel Lamed.
Ein Gimel Lamed, okay. I've often said I need to talk and think at the same time. Ein Gimel Lamed. Now, your lexicon will probably say pronounce that Egel or something like that, Egel. But there's a linguistic feature there. When you have a hard G, a vowel in front of a hard G, when you say it fast, you tend to get an N in there. Like in the Greek, it looks like it's spelled A-G-G-E-L. But to pronounce it, angelos. See, we get our word angel from. So this, in pronunciation, comes out as angel. All right? This means young bull, or calf. as in golden calf. All right. And Jeroboam rebelled, established the house of Israel, and kicked out the real Levites, set up the stooge priesthood. He made 2 golden calves, reminiscent of the one that was built coming out of Egypt, days of Moses. See, that golden calf angle, that was the bull that was associated with the house of Israel, particularly the tribe of Joseph. So the Anglo-Saxons, that's the young bulls and the sons of Isaac. I think we've about seen what's on that. And what else do we need to talk about?
Let's go to the map, because here was a question. And we have a lot of things, because there's a thing going around, teaching going around, and there's a lot of people, and this is one of the questions I was asked about. And we have a group called Black Hebrew Alliance, who say that all the Jews and Israelites were black because the slave markets of America proved that they was going to go into slavery. Now, is there any way to prove or disprove that?
Well, so many of these people that I've indicated here, descended from Abraham, were blonde.
Or blonde. Okay, now how can we know that they're blonde?
Now I mentioned something about myself, didn't I? I mean, just as a matter of fact. See, my family comes from this house of Troy. We haven't had the rulership since my ancestor Cadugan was murdered in the year 1111. But that's the lineage, okay? We've got the pedigree, or whatever you want to call it, all the way to Adam's. That's just 0 line. I've got blue eyes, haven't I? Okay, that's the only thing I can say.
Okay.
And see, so many of these Scandinavians and everybody else, even some Italian, Spanish, are blonde.
Exactly. Actually, true Spanish, go back and look at true Spanish, they are blonde hair and blue eyes.
No, they're the Semitic people, the real Spaniards. You're thinking about all these Hebraic elements in there.
Okay, well, that was the teaching that was coming out from a non-Hebrew point of perspective, was that they said that the actual Spaniards were blonde hair and blue eyes. That was them teaching, let's see, that was done in 1999, I think. That's when that teaching was out, and it was on TV showing that. So that's why I said that, because they said that the true Spaniards was blonde hair and blue eyes. But now we know also Jeremiah. You're talking about Jeremiah and Tar Heel here, okay? Because you said the lines were joined here by Princess Tiatet, who is also still buried at this same spot. Right. So, and these people know their lineage there. And as far as we know, there were some black people there, but they come from the war between Spain and Britain when the Armada was sunk. Were there not some Moors that had got?
All right, yeah. By that time, a lot of the Spanish and Portuguese had Moorish blood. Okay. The Moors are the Canaanite line. The lightest of the children of Ham. They were like black-haired, olive-skinned white types. And a lot of those Armada sailors that wound up shipwrecked on the coast of Ireland got taken in as heroes. See, Ireland was Catholic.
The Catholic.
Right. Certain families have those features, and they refer to it as black Irish. So it's just an olive brunette feature.
Okay. Now, Now, where can we, because there's a lot of things, because we have, like I said, you got two groups on every side, one, a lot of conflict. Where can we prove that because we do know that there are some blacks that have the Kohanim blood in, correct? Mm-hmm. So where can we find these people at where they can hopefully just have a starting point to see what the truth is? Because we know through history,
the blood is scattered all over, like that Jewish fellow that we've seen in programs on TV. We found all these different peoples over in Asia and India and around China that know that they're Israelites. Some of them say that they're a tribe of Naphtali, or the tribe of Dan, maybe, or Manasseh. They say Manasseh. Elements of them scattered around and maintain their identity. Most any of them will look about like the people who live in them. But that little bit of Israelite blood is all it counts to. Okay. And at about the same time as the Sephardics, at the time of Solomon, went into Elia. Another element of Jews went into Ethiopia.
That's one.
So you're going to have an influx of Jewish bloodline there.
Yeah, you look at the so-called Ethiopian Jews, and you can tell they're not entirely black. They're dark skinned. They don't have the normal features like the surrounding black people do.
What he was reading a while ago about the identical features and stuff, which you also see in some Native Americans.
A lot of them don't look like other people's around them in that sense.
Now, we also know that Solomon had a port here where he was getting his gold and stuff coming from. And we know that he went...
A lot.
And a lot. We know that...
Elat is called King James, right here in the Gulf of Gulf.
And we know that his ships would sail to a place called Opiru, which is...
Ophir in King James. Opiru.
Which is Peru. And there's been Israeli coins found there from that time period. There's also up into in the western United States, there's been Hebrew or Hebraic artifacts that have been found on the East Coast, and on the West Coast and on the East Coast.
Yeah. See, at that time, Solomon was allied with the king of Tyre, Hiram. And they had a navy that sailed all over the world. Like I say, there's several references in the books of history in the Bible about this voyage. His ships had come out of the Gulf of Aqaba into the Indian Ocean, and they pick up apes and spices and whatnot in southern Asia. I figured to stop off in Japan. They would go all the way across the Pacific to the west coast of South America. That's where Solomon got all that pile of gold that it specifies exactly how much it had. And it says that voyage took a 3-year round trip. So that wasn't any local area thing. Over here, back in the 60s, we found a Phoenician inscription on a cliff in Brazil that mentioned King Hiram. So ancient Israel wasn't just some little hick outfit confined to a small territory here. They early on formed nations along in here in different places. Like the Pelasgian and Sea peoples, which I believe are in this territory here.
Now, we know the Canaanites was in battle with Israel, and when Israel finally defeated them, he said that they left here and formed Carthage. And then, of course, we know about Carthage and Rome getting into it all as a constant battle with Hannibal and everything. So, of course, Hannibal used Iberia for...
Yeah, he came around, I think he even had elephants, came through the Alps into North Italy.
So now you also talked about he would control that they would control the seaports. Now, once again, you look at the seaports or the gateways. Gibraltar, of course, we know that Britain has this one here. Now, this right here is Turkey today, and with I can't think what that's actually called, but you got there's another city there, Constantinople, which is also
it used to be
Istanbul too, which is on this side. So,
see, this is the small passageway between Europe and Asia Minor.
yeah, and Istanbul is actually on the left side of the sea, where Turkey is on the right side of that pass. But Esau still has control of the pass, but the United Nations still has the control and interest here, correct? Today? Or
UN?
Well, you got the United States.
EU. Greek part of the EU.
Yeah, probably England and still's probably got, which would still be, the tribes still got the actual foothold with their navies here. And
yeah. The thing about this is, like I say, the Russians only got that one seaport way up here in the frozen territory.
now they got the Caspian Sea, but they don't.
See, they have some of this territory here on the Black Sea, but to get out into the ocean, they're going to have to come through here and then come through Gibraltar, or else go through Suez.
Now Suez is now controlled by Egypt. This is controlled by Turkey. And so this is still the only one. And I think these are still controlled by the tribes of Dan or of Israel here on this side. So, yeah, it's pretty amazing how that scripture where you read about.
See, any way you go at it through here, you have to go around Britain.
So when you read about the scripture about Joseph crossing his hands, and he said that Ephraim will be the strongest, even though he's the youngest, and Manasseh, even though he was the oldest, he'll be many nations, but won't be as strong as Ephraim. So now when you see all this happen, we actually see this happen with Britain, actually fulfilling that with Manasseh and becoming the strongest, or becoming the many nations, but the youngest of the brother, which is, and in the United States becoming Ephraim, the youngest brother, becoming the powerhouse over his brother.
Now, what it said was a people and a multitude or fullness of nations. Melo HaGoyim. See, that's Ephraim. See, Manasseh was to be a people.
Which would have been.
Even though they were to be a great nation. And you see, numerically, there's a lot more of us than there are British people, even though they were scattered all around the world. They're colonial places, still part of the Commonwealth, more or less. They're generally not all that much populated like Canada and Australia.
Now, here's a question that was also asked, and I'm glad you got this up here. Tribe of the Danes. Okay. Now we know Zerah's line ended up here also. Okay. So can you have a mixing of two tribes here? Because you got the Danites here, but then you also got the Jewish line.
Well, yeah. See, anywhere you have a royal house, it's going to be Judah. No matter what the tribal makeup around you.
So even though you could be Irish and we're from the tribe of Dan, you still can have the Jewish bloodline.
Yeah, I think a lot of them have. Fact is, I sort of think David made a trip there one time.
Well, we know Yeshua did.
And you know, red hair is very common in this area here. And 1 Kings 16:12 shows, you look at different translations, looks like he was a freckle-faced redhead. My mama and my 4 big kids are all redheads.
Yeah, I got some traces in my beard, so I know that.
Oh, I see. It's great.
Yeah, keep it up. Keep laughing, hero. So, like I said, so you got the tribe here, and the Danites. And then, of course, we know the Tar Hill with Torah Hill. So you got all these, and then, so pretty much, even though you can be of another tribe, with her married into the line of Zerah here, so you got the breach of the brothers being closed by Pharez's great-great-great-granddaughter into Zerah's line, closing that breach, bringing the house back together. That would still fulfill today what we call the grafting in, because regardless of what tribe you are, you're still going to be the house of Judah. Would that be a fair assumption?
No, you'll be an Israelite. Apparently, people will be assigned to some tribe, some specific tribe.
Okay, all right, you lost it. Okay, if we know we're Jews because of where we're from, you know you got Jewish blood because you're from the line of Zerah. Okay, so you don't know you're going to be in the Jewish tribe, correct?
Probably so, I think.
Okay, so the only ones that would know would be the foreigner or the ones that maybe is not of Israelite blood whatsoever.
Well, the thing is, the reason we can trace ours back is because, like you said, Judah is the royal line, and the historical record and lines of royalty are always kept. All the commoners past maybe the, 1600s or maybe a little earlier than that, they don't know where they came from as far as who was in their line.
Yeah, what I've always understood is that when somebody was not Israelite, no matter what color, race, ethnicity, whatever, when they are converted, devote themselves to the God of Israel, then they are grafted into the olive tree representing Israel.
Exactly.
And evidently they are just consigned to a certain tribe.
They were, the consensus was taken, and then
Like Caleb, his namesake. Caleb was the lead man of the tribe of Judah when the 12 spies went out. Caleb was a descendant of Esau. He was adopted in.
Adopted in. That's what the word grafted actually means, adopted in. And we know when you adopt somebody, they become part of your family.
Yeah, it keeps saying Caleb was a Kenizzite, okay, who was Kenaz. Look at genealogy reference. I forgot exactly the word. Kenaz was the grandson of Esau. He abandoned that personality and line of thinking attitude most of them have.
Now, here we see a little bit of, even in the day, we see a little bit of Hebrew in our English system. Because we have Britain, which is called British.
I meant to mention that. See, God made a covenant with Abraham. Covenants are very important in the Bible, okay? The Hebrew word.
And still binding.
Put your tail on it, Dad. There you go. You didn't do that while ago.
That's real. Covenant. Right. Most anybody knows from what's in Genesis, even the King James, that Ish is man. So what does British mean?
Covenant man.
The collective of people. See, That's the main
The
holding
suffix.
up point of the covenant people.
You think the suffix in English comes from Hebrew because ish means like pertaining to, right?
It's come to mean that linguistically, but I think something like that is great. Actually, British has nothing to do originally with Anglos and Saxons. See, the Celts that came out in here were the, in English, Brythonic Celts. See, the main state of them left today are in Wales. Notice over here you got Britain. When the Anglo-Saxons kept pushing and killing out people here for in England, like I say, the Welsh hold up behind the chain of mountains. Some of them jumped the channel and established Brittany province over here on the coast of France. Some of them are on some islands in here, like the Manx. But they still have a dialect of Welsh there. See, you have two main Celtic languages there, the Gaelic, as we call it, and the Brythonic. Brythonic became Welsh. And I guess a few people in Scotland and Ireland still speak Gaelic.
No, they do. So that's also because we can see most things Irish, Scottish, and then of course the British. So,
And here you have the Danish,
the Danish.
man of Dan.
Which once again, yeah, the man of Dan, which once again, all the issues are actually were Dan tribes.
You may have thrown somebody a while ago talking about Tet. See, what it was, God had an eternal covenant with David that there would always be somebody, a descendant of his, to occupy his throne. See, David's throne wasn't really his. Check out what's in the covenant there. That throne belongs to the Messiah himself. And he will take it over and occupy it in Jerusalem when he gets back. Okay. Well, it seems that line of David ended when the house of Judah fell. But you have Jeremiah and Baruch down here in Egypt with some refugees. And it shows that he, among the ones he had charge of, he had the king's daughters. Well, he and Baruch sailed from Alexandria port here to Egypt, to Tara Hill, and took to Zedekiah, the final king. You know, he was carried off to Babylon, had his eyes put out, and all his sons were killed. So right there, he had no male lineage. Tehatepi, the princess, married Haraman, the Zerah king there at Tara Hill. So that was the healing of the breeds. The two lines were conjoined. Right. And the Irish annals say that they brought 4 things with them. A large uncut rock, a flag with a line on it, a strange chest that was said to have magical powers, and what was the other thing? Well,
A woman?
oh, yeah, maybe she was a 4. Anyway, the flag of the line of Judah, which, by the way, is my coat of arms from Wales. It's just like the flag of Jerusalem, blue line on the shield of gold. That rock, well, the James at the throne chair at Westminster Abbey, where all the kings and queens have been coronated since King James, mounted underneath that chair there. Elizabeth sat on it in 1953 when she was coronated. There's this big rock, and they used to have a little sign where it said Jacob's pillar stone. Well, the prophecy says that the throne of David would overturn until he become whose right it is, the Messiah. See, first overturn, it went from Jerusalem to Ireland, then to Scotland, and Edward I took it to London when he was coronated. That's 3 overturns. So the 4th overturn will be taken back to Jerusalem.
And of course, we know that Queen Elizabeth can trace her roots all the way back to all the way to her. She does have the Jewish roots all the way back to Adam and Eve.
I've got a copy of Queen Victoria's chart.
And of course, now
showing that she is a descendant of David.
Of course, now your chart lines up with hers also, correct?
To a point, yeah. Our common ancestor is Edward I back in 1300, the one that moved it
Longshanks.
from Scotland to London.
I think we pretty much have and show where the true migration of the true 10 tribes. Like I said, there's too much stuff out there showing, like I said, bloodline, hairline, facial features. I don't know what else can be said, but we also know that during Yeshua's time, he sent his disciples out to the 10 tribes, which at that time they knew who they were with the 10 tribes in that area. And so I'm hoping this is making it pretty clear.
But we need to state, this is not a racist
No,
thing.
it's not.
The reason that this group of people was chosen was to serve the rest of the world. They're supposed to be the model nation, but we've never even begun to make a stab at it yet, but it will ultimately be yet. But we're supposed to be a light to the Gentiles and show them the way to true success and happiness and everything. That's yet to come.
Still working on that.
So much of this, what they call British Israel, developed back in the 1800s. The British, they took that as a thing of superiority and even were against the Jews a lot of times. Very anti-Semitic.
Yeah, well, we've seen that after World War II with the forming of Israel.
See, that was a gross misapplication of this understanding we've been talking about here. See, when so much of this I initially learned 45 years ago from Herbert Armstrong. Right? When he studied into this thing, this stuff, along with establishing the South. He bounced off the ceiling a few times, threatening to divorce his wife when she came in one day in 1926, said she's going to keep the Sabbath. Surely all these churches can't be wrong. But his business about collapsed, had a lot of time on his hands, so about living in the library for 6 months. Came out not only establishing the Sabbath, but also reviving the celebration of the feast days. And understanding the Israelite identity and the fact that there's 2 houses that will eventually be rejoined. Okay. When he looked at this, what he concluded was, this is the key to opening up latter-day prophecies. So let's look at it in that light.
That's it.
We're not teaching salvation by bloodline.
No. No, unfortunately, that's what some of the groups that, it doesn't matter what color you are, what some of the groups are doing. It's well, no, it's not. It's by you believing and being grafted in or adopted into the kingdom.
I don't care what your bloodline is. If you live like a Gentile, then you're a Gentile.
You're a Gentile, exactly. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope this teaching that Wade has done shows you exactly where the 10 tribes are, and maybe later on we can get into a teaching on, like I said, some of the stuff that we're talked about here and some of the prophecy. Okay, this is not a racial issue. Okay, this is an issue, like you said, of a nation that was chosen to go out and serve other nations to show them things. So let's not make it an issue. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, red, yellow, purple, pink, polka dot. It doesn't matter what skin color you are. What matters is here. It's in the heart. Okay? And if you're going to serve the Almighty Creator, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, that's what it comes down to. If you serve Him, it doesn't matter, even if you're not of blood descent, you're going to be adopted in, which makes you blood descent by adoption. So, Wade, brother, appreciate coming on and doing this lesson. And I've been bugging you for 4 or 5 months, so he finally got it. So, bugging him for you. I told you I'd stay on top of it, so we finally got it. So, ladies and gentlemen, for the Hunting Blind, NRN, Nazarene Space, Nazarene Media, myself, Christopher Frederiksen, our cameraman. Love, peace, and chicken grease. Shalom, shalom.
The young grow weary, they run and they faint. I wanna be strong, yeah, teach me to wait.